Hi, this is Gary with MACMOST.com. Let's take a look at how to safely get your files off of iCloud Drive. So let's say you've got your desktop and documents folders set to be on iCloud Drive, and you've also got the Optimize Mac storage setting on. This is a typical way to use your Mac. All your recent and frequently accessed files are always cached locally, and ones you haven't used in a long time may be offloaded to save you space. But let's say now that you want to get your files off of iCloud Drive. Maybe you need to switch off iCloud Drive for a while, or maybe you've got too much stuff there and you want to do some spring cleaning. Whatever your reasons for doing that, how could you do it safely? Because it seems like if you turn off desktop and documents folders, you may lose the files there. And if you turn off iCloud Drive, you may lose all the files in iCloud Drive. But that's not actually the case. If you were to turn off desktop and documents folders in your iCloud Drive settings, you would simply have a separate desktop and a separate documents folder locally, separate from the one in iCloud Drive, but you could still access both of them. So your files wouldn't go anywhere. They'd still be on iCloud Drive, but you wouldn't be able to see them on your Mac unless you specifically went to your iCloud Drive desktop and documents folders, not your local desktop and documents folders. So for instance, here I am in my documents folder. I can click on documents here on the left and it takes me to it, or I can use Go and then Documents to go there. And if I command click on the title here, it'll show me the full path to this folder. And you can see Documents is simply at the top level of iCloud Drive. As a matter of fact, if I go to iCloud Drive, and there's an item here in the left sidebar as well, you could see everything at the top level of iCloud Drive, including my desktop folder and my documents folder. On the other hand, if I go to the top level for my computer, I'll see my local drive. There it is right there. I'll dive down into that. Then I'll see my users folder. I'll dive down into that. Then I'll see all the user accounts on this Mac. This is my home folder here. It's got a little icon next to it with a house to let me know this is my current home folder. I have other accounts and these are the home folders for those. I'm going to dive down into this one. And you'll notice here, there's no desktop and there's no documents folder. That's because they're in iCloud Drive. If I had desktop and documents in iCloud Drive turned off, then those two folders would be here. And we'll see that in a minute. Note that your home folder is on your local drive in your users folder. So this represents files that are not part of iCloud Drive at all. They only exist on this Mac. Taking a look at a second Finder window here, I see the top level iCloud Drive. So this represents everything on iCloud Drive. This really represents everything that I have local on my Mac. And you could see the desktop folder here, and it even has the two files here that I can see on my desktop, and my documents folder with all of these files. They are here in iCloud Drive. I have no desktop or documents folder here locally. So what happens if I were to go into System Settings and then go to iCloud, go to Drive, and then turn this off? Well, let's do it and see. I'm going to switch it off here, and I'm going to turn this feature off. So I haven't turned off iCloud Drive. I'm still using that. I'm just turning off the desktop and documents folders feature. So this restores my desktop and documents folders to the home folder here, but there's nothing in either one of them. It starts me off with two blank folders. So where'd all my stuff go? It looks like it was all deleted, but it actually didn't move at all. In iCloud Drive, I still have the desktop and documents folders that were there before. And if I look in them, all of the files that were there before are still there. They haven't moved at all. The difference now, though, is if I use the Go menu and go to Documents, or go to Desktop, or look here on my desktop, it's looking at the folders in the local home folder, which have nothing in them. However, if I go to iCloud Drive, or simply click on iCloud Drive here in the left sidebar, I could see both of those folders there. So all my stuff is still there. There's no problem. It actually hasn't moved at all. There's just a slight shift in how I access them. The desktop and documents items in the left sidebar, or the actual desktop itself, they're pointing to these two folders here. And the iCloud Drive folders for desktop and documents are separate. This is so that on your iPhone, your iPad, or on another Mac, you actually can be using these as your desktop and documents folders if you want. It's just on this Mac that the default desktop and documents folders accessed by the sidebar and by the Go menu are not the iCloud Drive ones, but the local ones. So you haven't lost anything at all. You've just switched how you access things. Now, what happens if you turn it back on? And you could pretty much guess what happens there. The desktop and documents folders that are in your home folder disappear, and the Finder sidebar items and the Go menu, they go to the iCloud Drive versions again. But what happens if you've put files in the local versions, like I've done here? In the desktop on iCloud Drive, I haven't touched it. It still has those 2 files there. But I put a new file here in the desktop folder locally. So now when I go to System Settings and I turn this back on, as you can guess, it's going to merge them. It won't get rid of anything. So I'll turn it on like this. So what you can see, what it's going to do is create a folder to store these items. This will prevent any conflicts where there's, say, the same file name. So now I've got the 2 files that were there before in iCloud Drive, and I've got a new folder, and it's just named Desktop Mac Studio, and inside I find that 1 file. And I can do with it what I want. I can move it up to the desktop if I want, or anywhere else. But you can see now in my home folder, the desktop and documents folders are gone. And once again, the Go menu and the sidebar items link to the one and only desktop and documents folders, which are part of iCloud Drive. But let's say you wanted to get everything out of the desktop folder and the documents folder, move it to your local home folder instead of having it in iCloud Drive. Well, I'm going to show you 2 methods for doing that. One's simpler, the other's more steps, but it's less prone to error. The simpler way to do it is simply turn off the iCloud desktop and documents folders option like that. And now with that off, you've restored your desktop folder and your documents folder into your home folder, but there's nothing in there. They're empty. In iCloud Drive, you still have your desktop and documents folder, as you would expect, but what you really want is the files to be here in your home folder, not in iCloud Drive. So now just simply move them. For instance, I can select the 2 files here on my desktop and drag them to the desktop. I can select all of the files and folders here in the documents folder and move them to the documents folder and my home folder, thus emptying out both of these. These are both empty now. So iCloud Drive always has the desktop and documents folder for use for other devices, but they're empty now. I just have my desktop and documents in my home folder like I want. And it was very easy to do with this method. If you find these videos valuable, consider joining the more than 3,000 others that support MACMOST through Patreon. You get exclusive content, course discounts, and more. You can read about it at macmost.com/Patreon. Now let's look at another way to do it. So before turning off desktop and documents folders, let's get the files off first and then throw this switch. So here in iCloud Drive, I've got my desktop and documents folders filled with files. So I'm going to create a new folder here in the home folder, and I'm going to call it Desktop Temp. And I'm going to create another one and call it Documents Temp. And now I'm going to move the files from my iCloud Drive desktop folder into Desktop Temp, taking them out of iCloud Drive and making them just local in these temporary folders. I'm going to do the same thing with the documents folder. I'm going to select all the files in it, and I am going to move them to Documents Temp, move them all there. Now, that may actually take some time if you've got the Optimize feature turned on and not all the files are downloaded. It will download the ones it doesn't have cached locally first before moving them. So now I've got iCloud Drive, desktop, and documents folders empty, as you can see here. But on my local drive, I've got these folders I created called Desktop Temp and Documents Temp filled with those files. Those files are now local. Turning off desktop and documents now on iCloud Drive really doesn't affect very much because these folders are empty. So now I can turn them off just like that. And now you can see on iCloud Drive, nothing's really changed. The desktop and documents folders are still there in case an iPhone, an iPad, or another Mac needs to use them. But here in my home folder, it's restored my documents folder and my desktop folder, but they're empty right now. Remember, I put everything in Desktop Temp for desktop. So I'm going to just move these files to the desktop folder and get rid of the now empty Desktop Temp folder. I'm going to move the contents of Documents Temp and put them in my Documents folder. And now I can get rid of the now empty Documents Temp folder. So now I've got all my files in desktop, in documents, on my local drive in my home folder, nothing in iCloud Drive. And I did it in a few more steps than the previous technique, but in a way that might feel a little safer. Now, what about the other folders in iCloud Drive? You're going to find that many apps create folders here for use by those apps. For instance, a Pages folder may have a bunch of Pages documents. It just becomes the default save location, especially for the iPhone and iPad, to save things like Pages, Numbers, and Keynote documents. Other apps, even third-party apps, may also use it as the default location. So what you would want to do is go through each of these folders, see what's in it, and move that to your local home folder. So for instance, in this Keynote folder here, I could simply drag the Keynote folder to my Documents folder. And what it'll do there is it will copy the files to a folder. It's going to use that same name, Keynote, here in my Documents folder. So I could do that with my Keynote folder here. I could do that with, say, my Numbers folder here. Just drag that to my local Documents folder there and just make sure I've got copies of all of these files. Notice how it's copying them, not actually moving them. So you're going to end up with duplicates now. So after confirming that all of these files are in fact here in your Documents folder, you may want to delete everything from here. And just do that for each one of the folders you find in iCloud Drive. It's also fairly normal to have very few or no extra folders here, or they're simply empty. But if your goal is to clear out iCloud Drive and make sure you get everything, you're probably going to want to examine each one. Now, at this point, you could turn off iCloud Drive. After all, if you've cleared out everything from iCloud Drive, there are no files in here, nothing for you to access. But it doesn't hurt to leave it on. Your desktop and Documents folders are stored locally. But if you want to, you can. Now, this doesn't get rid of iCloud Drive. It's still there. You're just removing access from your Mac in the Finder. You do have the option here when you do this to keep a copy. So we've done everything manually up to this point, removing everything and putting it where we want before turning off iCloud Drive. But you could have just used this option here to automatically have everything moved and saved to a special folder if you really wanted to. I'm going to choose Remove from Mac just to demonstrate what happens. Now you can see all your iCloud Drive options have collapsed because you don't have iCloud Drive anymore. If I use Go and go to iCloud Drive, you could see a message here saying that iCloud Drive isn't connected. But just to show that iCloud Drive is still there, you're just not seeing it in the Finder, you can go to iCloud.com and you could sign in. And once there, you could go to Drive and you'll see all of your files that you've left there, if there are any. In this case, it's just those empty folders now, but they're all still there. And you'd be able to access them in the Files app on your iPhone, on your iPad, or using iCloud Drive on other Macs. The only change from turning this off is now you can't access them in the Finder anymore. And if I turn it back on, then I've restored my ability to go to iCloud Drive again in the Go menu or in the left sidebar, and I'll find everything there, although it may take a few minutes to actually see everything appear. So if you do need to clear out your iCloud Drive folder for any reason and want to save all the files locally, I've given you a couple of options for doing that. Hope you found this useful. Thanks for watching. Want to know about every new MACMOST video each week? Sign up for the absolutely free MACMOST email newsletter at macmost.com/newsletter.